For many small towns, industry is everything. For Hornell, New York, that industry is trains. We talked with a group of former railroad workers about the importance of trains in Hornell and what life was like working on the railroad.
The history of the railroad in Hornell is what made Hornell. The railroad made Hornell.
If anyone knows what the railroad means to the city of Hornell, it's Stanley Hall.
I'm the third generation Stanley Hall that's worked in the old shops going back to 1916.
That's right, 1916. For the past 100 years, Stanley's family has been part of the history of Hornell, a history Stanley is trying to preserve.
I can look at any of the pictures and there's a little story behind everything that we have, you know. That's my father there.
Oh, wow.
Just a young guy.
Yeah. Monday through Friday, Stanley continues his family tradition by working in the shop where trains are manufactured. On the weekend, Stanley volunteers to share his knowledge with visitors to the Hornell Erie Depot Museum.
I do it every other Saturday for 2.5 hours because I've always been interested in trains and, you know.
And Stanley isn't the only person in Hornell keeping the history of trains alive.
It's just a group of geezers, all railroaders or related to railroaders, that come in on Thursday nights, sit in the office and tell stories.
Meet the Campfire Group.
Tell a few lies or exaggerations, should I call them, but it's just the gang.
Every Thursday night, Gene Baker, Bill Nasca, Charles Wells, and Rick Packer, all retirees, meet at the Depot Museum to reminisce about their days working on the railroad.
It just fell into place maybe a year ago? About a year ago. I've been going, I don't know how many years I've been doing this on Thursday night. One guy'd wander in on Thursday night, the next another guy.
We all were in different jobs, and it's interesting to know what he did, what he did, what he did, what I didn't do.
Talking with the Campfire Group is like taking a train back in time. They can tell you about the history of trains in Hornell better than any book because, well, they've lived it.
It's in our blood. You do it for 40 years, you can't just turn it off.
If you have questions about the history of the railroad, the Campfire Group most likely knows the answer.
The story is in 1851, a train came through from the east. Took days to do it in little leaps. But Millard Fillmore was on board. Daniel Webster in a rocking chair on a flat car. Oh, that's a famous story, yeah.
And so what impact has the train industry, the railroad industry had on Hornell?
Hornell wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the railroad.
What was the population? Something like 800 when the first train pulled in?
Yes, right.
And then it blossomed to 1,800 within 3 months or something like that.
But the story of Hornell and the railroad hasn't always been a happy one. Like many industries across the U.S., technological improvements in trains meant less need for human workers. When Hornell's headquarters closed, the effect was felt throughout the city.
Humongous.
Devastating.
Devastated.
This guy worked in the shop, you tell him, Dick.
Worked in the shop and they closed the shop right up, closed the yard. Everything was just closed right down.
But it should be noted that the story of trains in Hornell is far from over. Alstom, a manufacturer of Amtrak trains, just signed a contract to stay in Hornell until at least 2030.
Well, right now, Alstom is probably the largest private employer, you know, and they have the facilities here. We have the rail line still running through Hornell so they can bring in the different vehicles that we work on and things like that.
And as for keeping the history of trains alive in Hornell, the men at the Depot Museum have that covered.
I talked to him, I say, still dreaming about it at night. You know, go to bed, you wake up dispatching trains is what we used to do.
Oh yeah, I do. Still dream about it just about
right.
A couple times a week.